off, thanks so much for like sitting down and chatting. I think like the first question I have is just kind of like give me sort of an overview of both like what you've been doing in the past and like what kind of brought you to developing on Ethereum and kind of what that journey's been like.
I came from a background where I was doing a lot of microsites on the front end and doing some pretty standard CRUD backend APIs, doing whatever the fun technologies of the day have been. So for me, it's always been about learning and about growing. I don't think that there's ever been a time where a technology has come out that everybody was like, this is perfect. And so there's always a search for something newer that's solving different problems. That does come with its own challenges. Like you're always having to feel like you're relearning new things from scratch. And to me, that's something that's interesting because you can always take what you've already learned and apply that knowledge to how you think of the new thing. And so how I got into the blockchain space was via hackathon. Actually, it was the East Denver hackathon, the first year that happened. It's just something that sounded interesting at the time. So I went and I picked up a team of random people and we worked on an idea for the weekend, and it didn't really ever work. And I was super intrigued by the fact that there was this whole technology stack that I was very unfamiliar with that seemed powerful and useful, but at the same time I knew nothing about. So I really came into the space blind and unknowledgeable.
Wait, so what was the hackathon project?
Our hackathon project was called Put Up or Shut Up, and it was a way to
I like that.
it was a way to put your money where your mouth is when you're arguing with somebody online. So you could essentially put your money where your mouth is into some sort of third party, some sort of like intermediary place where it would be locked up until you could find an argument or a consensus that would unlock it.
Interesting.
We kind of ran into some issues of how you arbitrate truth in that situation. Right. So it never really would take off. Basically, like, it was too easy to game.
Interesting. That sounds. I mean, on one hand, yes, subjective truth is really hard to arbitrate, but on the other hand, I really like the idea of like having people put skin in the game to even have the argument in the first place.
Yeah, I think that was really the idea of that people have these online discussion battles and nobody's winning. So what's the finance? Like nobody cares about the conversation. Like I kind of just want to know who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Have you heard of the? All right, I want to actually like talk about this stuff, but that reminds me of. Have you seen like? Have you listened to a podcast? Seen like the format, IQ Squared?
Yeah, Intelligence Squared.
Yeah, like something like that. Like so that plus your put up and shut up would be really interesting. So like you poll the audience, they read the full thing. And then they change, and then the amount is unlocked based off of the polling shift.
Yeah, that's awesome. Put that one in your repository.
In my idea pile that we're never getting to. Yeah.
In your idea pile, yeah, you can have that one.
Thank you. So you did what I find really cool is that like you worked on something. You banged your head against the technology and like it wasn't necessarily successful, but you still were like, well, this is really cool. I should probably do more of this.
Yeah, it was interesting because there were so many new things that I just hadn't heard of before. And it seemed like when you want to reach for a tool that you're familiar with, there was already a decentralized version of the tool. and we were trying to use kind of the whole stack of it. So like IPFS for storage and hosting your files, and then just doing your data storage on chain. Having to use all the APIs to connect to the blockchain that we weren't familiar with. Trying to do this all locally was like a whole nother thing. Like how do you even start a development environment for these things? And then like how do you test it? And then how do you know that it's working? It was just a learning opportunity that I saw as something that would be like fun to learn, really.
And is it, I mean, you've been working in the space, what, a year now?
Yeah, about a year. Yeah.
And is it still fun?
Oh yeah, I think every day has been, there's more challenges than you could ever get to. So it's always about prioritization and how do you start to solve something so big, little pieces at a time, and how do you start to break that big problem up into something small and achievable? So I think for me, working on the Rimble team, it's been great to have people that you're all trying to solve problems together, because it's really hard when you're thinking about this stuff by yourself to really know where to start, where to spend your energy. If something's not in your specialty or in your wheelhouse, how do you reach out for help? So having that team of resources and people to collaborate with have been really helpful.
That's really cool. Have you, I guess, like, out of curiosity, what skills from like the Web 2 world do you feel like most directly port over? And I don't necessarily mean like languages. I mean like is there like a way that you approach problem solving, or is there something that like you feel like is you learned previously that like really especially prepared you for sort of developing like decentralized solutions and systems?
Yeah, one thing that's a great question. I think one thing that sticks out when you are asking that is just always putting the user first. And as a principle, when you're doing things in the Web 2 world, you're talking about that. And depending on what space you're in, I came from more of a marketing advertising background, so we were always talking about the end user and how do you get them to convert, and like funnels and those drop-off points and that kind of a thing. And so there's definitely an analogy there when it comes to Web3 space, especially when you're talking about getting somebody onboarded and completing their first transaction. That can definitely look just like a funnel. But one thing that's interesting right now is that the space is so young and the tooling's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
The developer experience is always relevant and always a frequent topic. And so how do you build tools for developers, and how do you build an experience for developers so that they don't have to start from scratch, or that they have a great, pleasurable experience using different tools and technologies? And so to me, that's kind of a newer thing to be thinking about, is the developer experience. But definitely from transitioning from the old Web 2 world of 5 years ago into the Web 3 world, I think always the end user. It's like, who's going to use this stuff? What are they going to find valuable about it? What are their pain points? And how can you make that pleasurable for them?
That totally makes sense. I mean, and I kind of that's actually like the perfect segue into it, right? Like into what I was talking about, which is just I think that I love the push that ConsenSys is currently working through with the 1 million devs. But if we don't think about, like, to your point, like the marketing piece, retention, supporting the development experience, making it progressively easier, like, we'll get a million devs and then we'll lose them, right? Like once they start, like after 6 months of banging their heads against the wall and realizing that they can't build an arbitration oracle like they want or whatever. So that's really interesting. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Or I would say, even if the developer comes and they can figure out how to build what they want, but there's nobody there to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like a two-step process, right? Like we need to be building the developer base, and then we also need to be building essentially like the user base around it as well, so that like there's an audience to like actually start building and like sort of utilizing the applications, the infrastructure that we're kind of rolling out. How do you? I mean, like kind of from your perspective, I feel like you have a really interesting perspective in that you're building for builders, right? Like you're actually building tooling for those. Like, could you tell me a little bit about how you approach that? Like, how do you build for other developers? Like, especially with people where like it's so the opinionation on how to do tooling, how setup should be. Like, how do you even start to approach that when it's such a wide and broad audience with so many different sorts of preferences?
Great question again. I think reaching back to the old way of doing things, you want to look first at your audience, your potential, who all are the developers, and then start breaking that down. Okay, so who are Web3 developers? Okay, that's like a smaller group, very small slice. But if we make that the whole pie chart, it's like, okay, there's all kinds of developers. There's back end, there's front end. So we're designing and developing tools for the front end. So like, okay, we just got a new pie again. And so out of the developers that do Web3 that are on the front end, what tools are those guys using? And so like that's when you have to start looking at surveying and interviewing as techniques that you can use to try to inform yourself to decide what technologies do you want to use, what languages do you want to use, what libraries are you wanting to use, and then from there, it's like, okay, we know that a lot of people building the front ends are React developers. We know a lot of them are using the traditional, like, I guess, React stack for talking to APIs, and then there's like this new middle layer of Web3 APIs, and it seems like they're always using different kinds of libraries. There's like Ethers.js, there's Web3.js. And so trying to just get a handle on what do people like to use, why are they using those, what do they like about that, what do they not like about that, and then say like, what pain points do you have that you don't have the time or the resources to fix, and then what are things that you would change about that, and how would you change it? And so really was what we try to do is be empathetic to people, ask them what their problems are, be good listeners, ask questions actively while they're talking to try to solicit answers. And then really we're building for them with the idea that if we build things that our potential users want, that they would then adopt them.
Yeah. So, I mean, what jumps out at me is that even as you are essentially building a product for which you are the user, which I think is like one of the most, that's one of the most, it's like one of the most frequent things that we end up hearing that I don't actually think is true in a lot of cases, which is like, I am the user for this. I feel like if it was true in any context, it would be true for a developer building dev tooling. And even in that case, you're needing to go research and do surveys and get a kind of like a broad sort of idea of how people work and how they, what their preferences are.
Yeah, and it's hard to not let your own biases, I guess your biases will influence and affect your decision making, but what are ways you can mitigate that and prevent that from becoming too strong? So you're kind of dealing with like trying to do qualitative research and quantitative research in a way that you are excluding your own biases out of there, so that when you are doing ranking exercises of like what features are we going to prioritize and what's our roadmap going to look like, that you're trying to take your own thoughts and feelings out of there as much as possible, that you're really trying to put what your users are saying to you first.
That totally makes sense. So to I think to kind of like shift the conversation a little bit, like just to kind of riff, in the hackathons that you've been a part of, and specifically in like, yeah, in the hackathons that you've been a part of, what do you feel like is missing? Like outside of obviously an amazing like UI and UX design framework. Like, what do you feel like is missing kind of for the Web3 world?
It's hard for me to answer that. I think that there are so many tools, so many resources. To me, the hardest thing, especially in a hackathon environment, is you don't have a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you decide? How do you make decisions on what Web3 library to use, what UI library to use, what local development environment to set it up on, what smart contract frameworks are you using? And so to say something's missing, I don't know if like that's really the problem. Like it's almost like there's too many things.
Oh, interesting.
Look at there's too much to learn, and when you're under such pressure, and maybe this is different if you are already familiar with a lot of the Web3 concepts and you've already done it a couple times. Like maybe you just followed some tutorials and maybe you built like a mini dApp and launched some smart contracts, and so you're familiar with the whole end-to-end life cycle. But for me, the hackathon creates this pressured environment where time is very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to take shortcuts and cut corners as much as possible. And so any tool that helps me do things faster are the tools that I want to reach for first in a hackathon environment. So like starter kits, boilerplates, skeletons, starter, anything are really the tools and the resources that I want to reach for first.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what are those resources and where are they are what I would say they're not missing, but you have to go find them. So like, how can I find maybe a dApp that's kind of already connected to a smart contract? And then like, I just need to change some buttons and some colors on it. And then what is a smart contract that maybe does 80% of what functionality I'm looking for that I can just change, maybe add a couple things here, remove a couple things there.
Yeah. It's almost like I was talking with Kames, and we talk a lot about like money Legos as far as like Web3 and Ethereum, but it's almost like we need to like abstract that up that one higher. This is what I was saying. It was like abstract it up one higher and think of it like it seems like we're missing sort of like a clear idea on the composability of these different pieces that we all have. Like we have a whole bunch of different tools, and we don't have like firm opinions on like how these fit together, and like there's a lot of friction in making those decisions. And Kane said something. He said like, you know, we have all these different pieces, but we're missing the green base that like you actually start putting the Legos on sometimes. So like that skeleton that you're talking about makes me think of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. Like I know for me, I've reached for truffle boxes before. Mm-hmm. There's like some good truffle boxes that I think can be the base plate, more or less. Like put your smart contracts here, and those would be like your back end Legos, and then inside of those, I think you'd have your own set of Legos that are like these DeFi contract pieces that would go into there, and then like same on your dApp front end side, like that has a nice place for you to put that. And so like for me, that was really what pulled everything together, were these truffle boxes. Is like I can clone one, I can click run, and then it stands up like an end-to-end experience that I can kind of see the whole thing beginning to end. And then I can get in there and start changing things.
Interesting. That's cool. I have to look that up. I haven't done a ton of like Web3 development, so I need to pull up the truffle boxes and kind of poke around.
It's a great way to get started.
Yeah, I need to. I'm gonna. That'll be my December after I finish all of this stuff.
Never enough time.
Never. That's really interesting. So what are like? I guess like what? I think we got 7 minutes left. So I'm gonna. I end these on like just sort of like some broad questions, which is essentially like what were your best and worst hackathon experiences and why?
Oh man, so I've done a lot
And
of.
this isn't limited to Web3. Like this can just be like
Yeah, I was thinking I've had a lot of different hackathons. Like for me, they're just like a fun way to try a new tool or technology or something that I haven't really had a lot of need for and may be my day job, but it's something that just like sounded really cool. So I'm always like at the hackathons, I'm never like there to win. I'm always there to like kind of learn and try new things. And so like most of like the bad hackathon experiences are always around like just not understanding how something's set up or how something works, or the documentation is bad. And a lot of these hackathons are set up so that you're testing and trying new frameworks and tools and resources. So like you're kind of finding the bugs for them. And so there's definitely been some hackathons where you're just sitting there for hours and something's not working. You finally like go and ask somebody that's sitting there that's like the resource guy for like, oh yeah, I wrote that. And then you show it to them and they're like, oh yeah, that's broken. That's a bug. Thanks for finding that. And that's super annoying and frustrating. So like that's probably like on my, we just don't get something finished because we spent too much time working on the tooling or the whatever and it didn't work. So that's always like never fun, is when you can't actually present because you didn't get it working and it's not done. So that's like the worst. That's happened a bunch of times. And then the best is just like any time that you can present it, that's a good time. Like anytime that it's in a place where you can say like, here we go, start at the beginning, click your way through the demo, and you can say that's it. Like that just feels really great because you had such a little amount of time, like maybe a day, maybe a weekend, to get something like that done. Sometimes like in these online ones, you can spend a couple more weeks polishing up something, but it's such a accomplishment. And especially if you're talking like a Web3 world where so many things are really rough on the developer side.
Yeah.
Like documentation's not great, resources aren't always available, that if you can get anything done that works even most of the way, like you should feel really proud of yourself and feel really good about your accomplishment.
I love that. That's a really good, I think that's a really good yardstick for kind of measuring a successful hackathon for yourself, right?
Yeah. Just be there to learn, be there to experience new people, new things, make friends.
Yeah, I like that. Out of curiosity, like, is there anything that you sort of, their mentality that you approach hackathons with? Like, is there a way that you assess like different projects and kind of like align, see how they align to your end goals, which is learn something new, build something interesting, meet interesting people, or are you just sort of like, you go with the gut?
I go with the gut. It depends. Like, I try to form a team ahead of time, but I always try to do it with randos. So like I'm not always hanging out with the same people all the time. So checking whatever channels hackers are chatting on ahead of time, and then usually I just go with whatever idea sounds the best. Like something that sounds something that sounds fun to me, something that's maybe unique that I haven't heard of. Like basically, I guess I want to win the hackathon. Like there's always that winning aspect to it. So it's like if we knock this idea out perfectly and we executed it just like to the vision, like if it's a 1-sentence pitch and like we build a thing that just does that 1-sentence pitch, and I think like, oh, we'd win the hackathon if we did that. So I usually gravitate towards those ideas, but sometimes like those teams or that idea just doesn't gel well, or maybe you hit some kind of dead end halfway through the hackathon where you're like, oh, this isn't gonna work. And you just kind of gotta write it out. At that point, you're too far gone. But as far as like selecting it, I just kind of like try to do it like a couple of days ahead of time, pick up a random team, go for like the best sounding idea, and hope it works out.
Interesting. Have you ever successfully pivoted a hackathon idea and like won, or felt like you finished really strongly?
Like pivoted?
Yeah, like you get a quarter of the way through and go like, oh man, this is not what I thought it was going to be. We need to fix this, and then do something else entirely.
No, No way, man. I feel like the mental exhaustion is usually just like, screw it, throw in the towel at that point. It's like, I don't have the time or the energy to start over on a new idea. It's like, if anything, it kind of goes the opposite way, where it's like your idea is so small and it's so like simple and easy that you can build it really quickly and easily. And you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe that actually worked and we got it done. Let's add more features to it.
And then you just keep on, like you
keep going.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey,
so like,
out of curiosity, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, just looking for those ideas that are really small and simple.
So it's like the elevator pitch.
Yeah,
like it's like you need to be able to say it in an elevator.
You need to be able to say it. It needs to be really simple. If it sounds like this really complex thing, like that's not gonna get done in 2 days. So don't go for that. Try to go for like the simplest, smallest little piece of work.
I like that. That's smart. I think at ETH Denver, you're telling me you had a game idea that you were going to do, right? Like it was like a button clicking game.
Yeah.
Where you like put a certain amount of ETH in or anything. Did you build that? How did that go?
Did not build that. And I don't know if it would have gone well, because I don't think I would have had enough time to figure out the smart contract side of that stuff.
Really?
Which is like my like not strength. My
weakness. Okay. Is the smart contract side?
Is the smart contract side?
Do you feel like I mean, that was a year ago. Do you feel like, or almost a year ago, do you feel like you have a better handle on it now? Like you could build it, or do you feel like that's still kind of that would be like a complex thing?
Yeah, I think my solution would just be trying to find a smart contract guy who's like very confident in his smart contract abilities, and I can handle the other parts.
I like it. That's my
divide and conquer method.
Yeah. No, I dig it. That's pretty great. Interesting. Well, dude, I really appreciate the time. I want to be mindful. I think that about does it for our chat. Super useful, like really incredible to kind of hear your perspective. I know, especially since so many hackathons, you had like such an interesting way to sort of approach them. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, no problem. It was great chatting.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Well, have a good one. Happy Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you later.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye, Zach.